This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 130, Summer PD Series number 5.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Kennerman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Mr. Matt, the relationship man Rogers, Miss Candace, shows 64 young, and Miss Bethany, shows 66 petty. We are super excited to continue our second annual Summer PD series. In case this is the first time you are listening to the Powered Up Podcast, this is a little bit different than our typical show format. During the school year, we always have amazing guests on the podcast, like we had Bethany and Candace a little time ago, where we learn about them, we learn about their passions, the things they do in the classroom that make it special on a daily basis, and try to peel back the layers and pull out some key strategies that we can apply to our own classroom. For our summer series, we are going to really dig in and focus on one specific topic and use the minds and the context that we have here to really dig into that. So for the purposes of this conversation, other than being the host of the show, I am a former 5th grade teacher, former elementary STEM teacher, and I now work as a secondary instructional coach. So Matt, why don't you say hi and introduce yourself?
All right. Hey, everyone. It's Matt Rogers. I am a 4th grade teacher in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. And before that, I was a learning support teacher of middle elementary for about 5 years. Let me hand it over to Bethany.
Hey everyone, I'm Bethany Petty. I'm a high school social studies teacher in Missouri, and I also teach educational technology for pre-service teachers. And this is my 15th year teaching. Candace?
Awesome. All right. My name is Candace Young, and I am from the beautiful state of Kentucky. And that's why when I talk, the tractor falls out. I'm from a little town called Gravel Switch, Kentucky. I knew Bethany would get tickled about that one. Anywho, so I am a physical education and health teacher at Madison Kindergarten Academy in Richmond, Kentucky, and I teach kindergarten PE all day long. Best job in the world. And I'm going to send it back to Ken. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you both so much. So I'm really excited to have you both here with us tonight. And so I want to dig into classroom and student relationships. And it's an answer that we hear, Matt, almost every single time when we hit the exit ticket. What is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student school experience better? I would say 98% of our guests have said relationships, know the kids. And even if they didn't say that specifically, it was some vague way around of actually saying that, because it truly is the most important thing. And even if we reflect as teachers, as professionals, when we have a supervisor, when we have a principal that does that same thing with us, it makes us want to do a better job on a daily basis in our job. So I really want to peel back beyond that of just saying we need to have positive relationships. We need to establish rapport. How do we do this? How do we do this at any age level? How do we do it from a genuine, positive standpoint to make this be meaningful for students, and then ultimately see how it impacts classroom management and student learning? So to just start it off real quick, how has your perspective on this changed over the course of your career versus going in year one to, now where you are in your career? How have you realized how much more important this is, or a different perspective you have on this in general?
Well, I think for me personally, as a first year teacher, first and second year teacher, you're so focused on establishing that you are the person in charge of the classroom and this is your classroom, and you have to be the gatekeeper of knowledge, and you have to, especially in my position as a high school teacher, I was 22 years old and standing in front of 17 and 18-year olds. So that was a real big thing for me, was kind of not necessarily asserting dominance, but kind of almost doing that, just to kind of make sure that everyone knew that this was my classroom. I can do this, and proving myself. But then as time went on, and I kind of let my brick wall of I'm the big bad teacher like fall down. I feel like in my mind I had a shift from I need to teach my students. I don't just need to teach my content. And I think that's a huge epiphany that I had. And I wish I could tell my first year teacher self that it's going to be okay. They know you're the teacher. They know you're in charge, but these are kids. And one of the cool things about being a high school teacher is that I get to be with these kids in their high school experience. And so many of us, when we're old and decrepit like we are right now, at least that's how I feel when I wake up in the morning. Um, that's what we look back on, right? Those were the fun days. Those were the glory days, and I get to be a part of that for those kids. So just moving from I need to teach my students, not just teach my content. I think that was a big thing for me.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of piggyback off that. To be honest, I am blessed because I started out in a K through 5 building, and then I went to middle school, and I taught middle school for like 3 or 4 years, and then I seen this kindergarten job pop up. So I've been everywhere. I did student teaching at the high school level too, so I touched every bit that I could. And to be honest, I've always been a relationship person. So I feel like with sports, I could always find a way to uh, to touch base with those kids that maybe the more difficult kiddos. And just to be honest, like going to their ball games, or even if I'm not the PE teacher, even if you're listening right now and you're not the PE teacher, and maybe you have no clue about sports, the fact that you're there and that you care and you show them that you love them. And I just believe kindness is free, and the more kind and the more loving you are to these kiddos, they're gonna be so much more successful, and then you're gonna feel like that you did an amazing job as well. So that's just the relationships is the key.
And I'm so glad you said that about kindness, Candace, because I really think that's a huge thing. I mean, I saw, I think it was on TikTok. I'm sure it was on TikTok.
That's where we get
But
all of our
it's one of
info
those.
these days.
Exactly. It's exactly. For better or worse, that's right. But I saw a TikTok, and it was one of those themes that you can, put on your video or whatever. And one of the questions was, why is everyone being so mean to me? Why don't people get along with me? And the response was, have you tried being nice to be around? Like, maybe start there. And I really think that's super understated. It's like, yeah, just be nice. Start with that and then build from there. And being kind isn't going to solve all of the problems in the world, but I mean, it's a nice starting point to show people that, you know put a smile on. Act like you enjoy what you're doing.
Well, and
That's a
I
big
think
thing.
we struggle a little bit with, especially early on, that imposter syndrome. Bethany, in your position, to be 5 years, maybe maximum, older than some of your
Uh-huh.
students. My
Uh-huh.
wife's a fourth grade
Yep.
teacher with me, but she started in the middle school. She is not a tall person, and when
Yep.
she would be reprimanded for walking through the hallways in between classes, where shouldn't you be in class type
Yep.
things, yeah, we totally understand
Yep.
why.
That's happened to me
Yeah,
too. They were like, people are like,
Oh, me
why are
too.
you on your cell phone? And I'm like, because I'm a teacher
Uh-huh.
and I'm going to the bathroom.
absolutely. And it's allowed.
I'll
Uh-huh.
assume that
Uh-huh.
was in the middle school, not the kindergarten academy.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
you're correct.
But
That actually happens to me all the time, and I feel like I'm a solid 5'2", depending on how high the bun is on top of my head. But I I mean, the things that I hear in the hallway, and then I turn around and they go, "Oh, um, And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to pretend that you think I'm a student because I look so young, not because I'm short. And they're like, yeah,
I
you
think it
betcha.
goes back to a lot of times we deal with what we heard before we even led into the teaching career. And Ken, I love how you asked that question. How has it changed in our career? I've mentioned throughout our podcast journey a few times that I feel like obviously every group that we have to adjust certain things. That goes without stating. But I look back very vividly of saying at the beginning of this year, I'm going to be firmer than I have ever been before because I fell into that role of friend teacher early on and not being taken seriously enough. And then I remember getting end of year report card. I gave kids report cards to grade me, and I probably should have done it at the mid year point. And I just got some honest feedback, and I was really firm with these kids. And my feedback ended up being I I wasn't myself in my own classroom. And I think that's where the two components really pop in. I feel like I am trusted with the families in my district to be myself. I don't need to be anyone else. And I think sometimes younger teachers, newer teachers feel like they need to be someone else, whether that's their student teacher model guide or what they saw on TV as their perspective of how to be. But the other side of it was just taking that real feedback and knowing that I wasn't accomplishing at the end of the year, end of the month, end of the week, I wasn't accomplishing what I wanted to. And that spoke for itself. A hard reality, I will say. And so that pendulum swung back and forth, trying to find what is that balance. But I think that's where, unfortunately, usually our conversation about relationships ends. Like Candace, I love you brought up going to a ball game. We mentioned and someone mentioned this. Ken, you might remember better than I would, but going to a event of a student makes all students recognize that you are invested in kids, that it has a feedback. Even if I didn't go to this ballet show or I didn't go to this baton twirling event, which I've had students request I go to, or it's amazing how just doing one, what is maximizing your time. I've got 3 kids playing Little League Baseball. I can get, a small percentage of my class, but that's better than a 2-hour dance recital for one kid. But that single thing, like you said, Candace, does make a difference. And I know it's extra time and I know it's outside of the contract. And I know that, especially as a new teacher, you're swimming in it already. But it really does make a huge difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Matt, I remember who said it because it was me who said it.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And this is now the second time you've brought it up, and you keep forgetting that I'm the one that said
Convenient, I guess.
so that's one example, and like you said, Matt, that's a big commitment. What are the simplest things that you do, whether it's regardless of when it happens in the year, the simplest things that you do that make a huge difference in establishing relationships with one individual or kind of impacting that whole classroom cultural overall?
So just to kind of piggyback off of what Matt said, when it comes to going and supporting your kids at all of their events, it can be daunting. It can be a big challenge. And I find myself, even, 15-year teacher, I'm like, I need to go and I need to do more. And it's really tough to find that balance, especially when I've got my 2 girls at home who are doing every single thing under the sun, and I am chauffeuring them everywhere and coaching their stuff. And so one of the things that has really helped me and might be helpful for other teachers too is, fortunately, my district has a social media feed. Like, we have a specific Twitter account just for all of our sports. We have a Twitter account for all of our fine arts. We have a Facebook page for our track and field. And that's easy for me to hop on and follow that and say, okay, ooh, this kid got a PR. Or I saw like one of my students hit a PR in, I don't even remember what it was, but I saw it and I was like, hey, that's awesome. No, I wasn't there, but I'm following all of it. We've we've had a lot of really successful sports teams in my district. And like I said, I've got to get my kid here, here, and here, but I'm going to turn it on the radio, or I'm going to pay the $10 so I can watch it on my phone while we're out to eat one night. That way, I'm still able to show, hey, I'm really interested in you as a person, not just you as a student, which is, I think, a really powerful thing when it comes to building those relationships. So it might seem daunting, but there are ways that you can keep up with it without going, like you said, Matt, and sitting at a 2-hour dance recital, which I get to do in a couple months. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? And I don't want to be insensitive to this, but I sometimes when talking about this, Ken, we've had this conversation. I mean, 100 some episodes. So this has come up by all means. And one of the I don't want to say sad, but kind of sad features is just showing interest in some ways seems like a big deal to some teachers. And I don't mean that to be rude. I understand that we feel stressed by curriculum and all of the different features outside of that. But we've heard suggestions of just remembering a conversation. And again, I have 17 kids that I see every day for 180 days. I am not holding a caseload like you, Candace, or you, Bethany, or, Ken, you trying to remember your old students that have facial hair and are much taller. So with that being the case, it seems so simple. And every time we hear like, oh, remembering that they're on the track team or remembering that they have this unique talent that was coming up sounds so obvious and so minimal. Am I wrong for thinking that? Does that really make that much of a difference? Please feel free to shame me into being more reasonable and understanding when we do hear something like that.
I think you're exactly right. And especially like you said, you have 17 kids. I have over 100, and I love them all. And I want to be there and support them all. And I think that, for me personally, whenever I hear, hey, are you coming to the game tonight? Or you haven't been to this game yet this year? Or are you coming to do this? It's almost like someone is piling one more brick on top of me. Like it's just like it's one more thing that's crushing me down. And then in true Bethany form, I'm like, I'm going to use the power of technology, and I'm going to keep up with all of this stuff. And I'm like, no, but I did pay $10 and 66 cents with tax to watch it online, and I saw your touchdown. That was amazing. Oh my gosh. So I think that if we can somehow like take the stigma off of, you have to go and you have to do all of these things, and instead of finding a way to still plug in to our students without necessarily taking on another brick on our pile. I think that's the way that I would hopefully broach that subject.
And sometimes you just have to change the way that you
Mhm.
hear it or that you
Yeah.
see it. So maybe it's not, I have
Right.
to do this. I get the
Mhm.
opportunity to do this.
Yeah.
I get the opportunity to see kids grow.
Mhm.
I get the opportunity to meet the kids where they're at,
Mhm.
because their parent isn't going to be at that
Mhm.
event, or their parent didn't even know they played basketball, or their parent didn't even know they liked music or anything really. And I have 500 kids. Every single year I get 500 new ones, 500 new ones, 500 new ones. They see me at Kroger or Walmart or whatever, and they're like, Coach Young, Coach Young. And I'm like, I don't remember your name. Tell me again. And talking about names, like
Mhm.
I literally print out
Mhm.
the list of my kids, and they have but the bad part about kindergarten is they don't have a school picture yet. So I literally have to like think, okay, that's that kid that has the pretty blue eyes, or that's that kid that talks as country as I do, or that's the kid that like I know their grandma, or I know their brother, or I know their sister, and I call it like the Oprah effect. So like whenever a kid is talking to me, especially a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, I'm going to look at them with the biggest eyes, and I'm going to be like, I am listening to you 100%. My mind and everything in me right now is listening to you. and let them know that they are what matters. And that's really hard to do with a class of 23, 26, 17, whatever. But I just try to go one on one with them, and like I say, meet them where they're at, love them, care for them, be kind to them. And honestly, that, like, it makes the Jesus in me, like just the heart, my heart just explodes. The relationships are the most vital thing. The classroom management and all of these other things, and dressing nice and professionalism and all of those things. Relationships is the key. Trust is the key. Loving on those babies, no matter how old they are. They're college kids. They're still your babies. You love
That's
them.
right. That's right.
And you're loving on them, and
Can I
it brings out the best in
can I
everybody.
layer on that one time? And Ken, I'd love to hear your thought about this. Going back to your very original question, you mentioned how have things changed, and the obvious answer is pandemic. I feel like the clothing wise, everything in the teaching world has gotten a little bit more relaxed, and I feel like the relationships that I have with kids are so much more real and authentic than they've ever been,
And natural.
and natural.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that there is some caution related to that we should consider. You know, what you're sharing and how honest you are being. I have Eagles season tickets to for the NFL. I'm not explaining about what I'm doing before or after the game or how late I was up to come in the next day. But I can share about my own experiences, and I don't have to feel like Cruella de Vil on Monday morning trying to get my kids into order. And is that, in your opinion, something that you saw noticeable change because pandemic? Because I even feel like I was starting to see that a little bit before, but the bubble really bursted, and now I feel like I have complete freedom, like you said, Bethany, to be natural, to be honest. I don't have to make my interests my kids' interests. I can have totally different interests. And I felt like my conversations before were trying to force feed, oh, this girl's loves horseback riding. I know nothing about it. So I'm trying to look up vocab words, speaking very clearly about things I don't know. Have you seen that shift? Have you seen that adjustment? And how has that enhanced your relationships, if you can relate to those observations?
I'm gonna jump in first real quick and just say that you've mentioned this before, and we've talked about this before. And what's interesting is I didn't see the shift. I also moved into instructional coaching during that time, but I didn't see, for me personally, I didn't see a shift because it was something I was always comfortable with as a classroom teacher. But I think it's similar to the exposure to technology. There were teachers before the pandemic not using technology, and then they were forced to, and they had to, and then they started to learn the benefits. They started to get a little more confident. Now they use it a little bit more by choice because they don't have to anymore. I think it was kind of the same thing for teachers that were maybe a little bit more shut off, not in a negative way, but they were more private. They couldn't be because we were zooming from home. We were making videos from home. You know, your living room was in the background, or your own children were in the background, or whatever the case was. And I think it forced teachers to let their guard down that maybe had their guard up a little bit more than before, and they saw the positive aspect of it, or just the realization of, oh, this is okay. I am comfortable with this. And so I think that's kind of where the shift has taken place a little bit. I don't know what the two of you
Well,
think.
Matt, to kind of piggyback off of what you said a little bit ago, when when you realize that your district hires you to teach because you are you, not because you are this something else, you're not a model or a copy of somebody else. I I personally felt that change in me before the pandemic. I always say that. Sometime after having my second daughter, I lost all sense of shame, and I feel like my classroom is better for it because I was me. Like, I am energetic, I am goofy, I'm a giant nerd. I love to read, I love to run, I love to drink coffee, I love to binge watch Bridgerton. Like, all of that stuff is me, and that's okay. And when I show who I am, my students feel like they can show who they are, And that wall of, oh, you're the big bad teacher and these are the students and they have to sit there and raise their hand and, do all these things, it kind of goes down. And I also feel like, Ken, like you took the words right out of my mouth. I think that the pandemic forced us to do that. Because I vividly remember sitting at my kitchen table towards the end of the original shutdowns. My oldest daughter was in third grade. She was sitting to my left and she was working on an assignment. My youngest daughter was sitting on my right. She was in first grade. She loves history like I do. And she had pulled her chair up next to me. And she was kind of off camera, but she was listening to our Western Civilizations lecture. We were talking about Martin Luther. And I was talking about the 95 Theses. And I see out of the corner of my eye, she raises her hand and goes, Mommy, I have a question. And my students on Zoom lost it. They were like, bring her in, bring her in. So from then on out, Molly joined our class. She sat right next to me, and that's okay. It is okay to bring some of yourself in to your classroom. But then also, like you said, Matt, we've got to have that boundary. Like, I go to the Cardinals games as much as I want. Nobody needs to know about my favorite meal at the ballpark, right? Um, and I love to read books, but maybe I'm not going to recommend Outlander to my kids to read. You've got to be able to, and I think most teachers do, like, this is me as a teacher, and there's a blend between the two, but there's also a line. So I think all of those things have helped me be more comfortable in my classroom, which helps my students be more comfortable in my classroom.
Yeah, Candace, I'll let you jump in real quick, but I want to make a comment off of that. I was covering for a teacher this past week so she could go support another teacher. I wasn't just covering as a sub. And one of my former students, she's a sophomore now, so I had her 5 years prior, was in the class, and she, kind of said hi to me. She wasn't very energetic about it. Sometimes the high schoolers like to pretend they don't know me, and I was a little bit surprised because I had a pretty good relationship with her when she was in fifth grade. She was one of my like very energetic kids, and about three-quarters of the way through the class, they were all just working on independent work. She looks up and she says, "Mr. Ehrman, how's your son?" And my son was born when I had her in my class. And then she asked, like, do I have any other kids? And we had like a 20-minute really nice conversation. And when you were just talking about that, Bethany, it made me realize, like, when my wife was pregnant, with one of the TAs had a little pool because we didn't know the sex of the baby. So it was like, what day, boy or girl. And like all the kids picked a day and picked boy or girl. And the parents of the classroom threw a baby shower for me. So like that relationship too was there with the parents because I made the effort to have that relationship with the parents. They knew my wife was expecting. And, looking 5 years later, she wanted to know how my son was who was born while she was in my classroom. And he even came in and met the kids, towards the end of the year. So like those things really do matter, and they really do have an impact on your classroom. And it shows years and years later.
Absolutely. I'll just say this about the pandemic for sure. Like, we literally were letting our kids into our homes, and like they realized that we were human. And then it was like, oh my goodness, like I can be human. Like, I don't live at school. Like, I don't have a bed, or like I don't
Folds out
cover
of the
up with a
wall.
parachute at night. Yeah, I don't just like get under the parachute and
Mm-hmm.
take naps during the day because that's my
Mm-hmm.
house. Like, no, I live in an actual house and I have two dogs and they're golden doodles and they exercise with me. And so I would do videos on Wednesdays, and I would call it Workout Wednesday during the pandemic. And the kiddos would see me and my house and what was going on around me. And I truly do feel like it made me, as you all have said, like it made me be okay with like bringing the kids more into my life. And yeah, we're into their life, but I feel like the pandemic truly made us as teachers, and I hope this continues on, that like we're humans. Like, yes, we're superheroes, and yes, we work hard and all of those things. And yes, we teach you wonderful, awesome things that are going to make you so successful later on. But you know what? we're human, and here's our house, and here's what we're doing. And I mean, the pandemic had many negatives, many, but when you think of the positive, that's for sure a big.
Well, and just to take it another direction, like, yeah, there were the getting comfortable, letting kids kind of see what um, life is like is an important thing, but that was such a difficult thing for me as an educator. I've been in teaching 15 years at this point, but we came out of teaching preparation in college where we were supposed to be absent from social media. That was the safest thing to do as an educator, was to be non-existent. So the kind of navigating what is acceptable, what's not, and having social media accounts. I remember Ken had this wild idea, probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We had this conversation about, I'm going to communicate with my parents through Facebook. And I was aghast. Like I lost my breath when he said that. And it made such logical sense, but it was not acceptable when we were first starting. And to go from that spectrum where it was an all or nothing to, I'm hiding cups, I'm, not posting, and we can all read through the lines of what that looked like. There were antics going on, they just weren't being photographed. And I think that's wild. To I think back, Michael Jordan had his special, his 10 or 11 part special, and they talked about if there was social media around when these players were there. And I feel like we are so much closer to the birth of social media, and we just absolutely avoided it. And so that's where I see some teachers. I was working with a teacher who, they do TikTok videos all the time, which is totally fine. At first, I was like, "How dare you?" I felt like the old man, I needed a walker and get off my lawn. But she makes nail videos. She goes and lets the kids design a layout for her fingernails. She goes to a nail salon, and the artist replicates it, and that's one of their classroom motivations, is for the girls to, and guys, to have the opportunity to have input on her designs whenever she goes. And it's simple, it's in her realm of what she felt comfortable with, but kind of like that social media reservation and these relationships, I was like, oh, naturally we can't allow that. And then when you start peeling, why can't we? And you're like, we are responsible human beings that can be. I can go and drink beer and say that, not in my classroom of kids, but I can say that to my coworkers, and even almost parents at this point too, which again, I feel dangerous to say, but that's just our natural reservations.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I remember when I graduated from college in 2008, it was that last semester, like we had to friend our professor. That way he could go through and see what every single thing was to make sure it was okay. And I remember that and going, oh my gosh, okay. There was nothing bad, but it was still that, okay, should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I do this? And then like pictures from my honeymoon. Like, do I need to have a picture of myself on at the beach? Is that okay? And then it's like, you know what? Yeah, it is okay. I'm not. It's not my screensaver on my desktop. I'm not sharing this with my students. And like we said, and you said this too, Candace. It's like you're a person, like I'm a person. I don't have like you don't open my closet in the back of my room and my bed falls out and that's where I sleep. And um, so I think that has been a really big part of helping me build my relationships with my students, is that showing them that I'm a person. I'm a mom first and foremost. I'm a wife. I love to take naps. I love to shop. I do all of those things because I'm a person, and I'm also their teacher. And I think that's been really, really, really powerful for me.
So, how do you know you're successful? in forming relationships. So, Bethany and Candace, you're not only comparing year to year, but you're comparing class to class that you have throughout your week. Matt is a self-contained teacher. You're more comparing this year to last year and the year before. So how do you know you're successful in forming positive and meaningful relationships, both on an individual basis, like individually accountable with each student, and also kind of looking at each class you have as a whole and the culture of the classroom that you have? Candace, how do you know you're successful?
You know you're successful when the kiddos want to want to tell you about their day and want to run up to you and hug you. They missed you over spring break. They missed your class when you were out and there was a sub. And where were you? What were you doing? And back in the day, I probably wouldn't have said, "Oh, I went to Keeneland and watched the horses race for my personal day." But nowadays, where things have just changed, like we can talk about those things now. Or I was sick and I had a cold, or I had the flu, or I had the stomach bug, and they care and they want to know. And if they care and they show me respect and they show me trust, it means that I did my job and I did all of those things as well. And that's how you know you're successful. And when you feel it in your heart, and it gives me goosebumps right now just thinking about it, just that they know I love them and I know that they love me.
I think the way, like the measure of success, I think it's different for every student that you encounter, at least for me at the high school level, because I'll have some kids that are very, Mrs. Petty, guess what? And I'm like, what? Hold on, let me take a drink of coffee first. Okay, go. And then I'll have some that the fact that they say hi when I pass them in the hallway, that's a big thing. That's a measure of success. I love, and my husband can attest to this, I love every year at graduation, because I teach juniors and seniors, and I'm going to get weepy because it's coming. Um, I love every year because you can always tell when the kids get on the bus for project graduation, because I say, you can add me on Facebook after you graduate. And as soon as they graduate, my phone will just be, and my husband's like, oh, getting on the bus. I'm like, yep, because here come all these friend requests. And it's like, oh my gosh, the fact that they want to continue to connect with me, this crazy woman who stood up on top of a table and sang about the Constitution, that they want to continue to connect with me as they move on through their life. I mean, oh my gosh, how cool is that? Or I always tell them, I won't tell you my political persuasion until you graduate, because my political views have nothing to do with my classroom. But if you really want to know, ask me when you graduate. And every year I have, like, the teachers sit on the front row and we're facing the students. And every year as the kids walk by, I'll have some like whisper, Mrs. Petty. And I'm like, stop it, graduate. And then we'll talk after you're done. I will not go home until I talk to you, but get your diploma. And it's that kind of stuff, and I guess that's a secondary thing. But whenever you have that and they're like, Mrs. Petty, I only have 2 more weeks and then I get to add you on Facebook, or then I get to follow you on Instagram, or it's just that kind of stuff that just makes your teacher heart just so happy.
Well, what I love
I
about
mean,
those two answers. Go ahead, Candace.
even at the middle school
Mhm.
level, when I taught middle school, and it's just funny that you said they just say hi.
Mhm.
Like a kiddo would just give you a head
That's
nod, and
great.
you're like, I got
That's
the head
awesome.
nod today. Like, yes, But anywho, I just like, I mean, it's so different between the grade levels,
Mhm.
but it's so the same at the same
Mhm.
time. It's crazy.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is your answers were at some level very different, but the kindergartner hugging you and the senior friending you,
Mhm.
it's the
Same
same
thing.
thing. They
It's
care
the
about you.
same thing.
They are showing in a way that makes sense with their age level that they care about you, and I think it's totally the
And
same. What about you,
it's
Matt?
really funny. I have to share this, that that I've been teaching for 15 years. I teach high school. It's really weird when I see former students in public, because I look at them and I'm like, okay, I know you. how do I know you? Because in my mind, I haven't aged. I'm still 22. I don't know what's happening. And so it's like, did I go to school with you or did I have you in school? And then they'll either say, hi, Bethany, or hi, Mrs. Petty. And once they come up with the Mrs. Petty, then my daughters, it's hilarious. My youngest will look at me and go, Mom, is that a current or former? And I'm like, what? Is that a current or former student? I'm like, that's a former. And then we have to move on. But it's like anybody that speaks to me in public must be a current or former student. Like, that's it.
Well, I'll just add, like, I think I love what you guys have shared. And Candace, I could only imagine having kindergartners and the legitimate shock that you don't live there and they're absolutely like hugs for days, but the ones that grip a little bit longer. I guess there is a reflection. My building is K through 6. And so classically, fifth and sixth graders will walk a way that doesn't necessarily have to pass my classroom. And I wear onesies almost weekly. I do Fun Shirt Friday every single week where we have terrible, terrible shirts. I have kids bring them in for, I was seeing this. I was shopping at Walmart and we have no clue what size you are, but we got you this anyway. So it could be a small, I'm putting it on. It could be a 2XL. It doesn't much matter. But that reflection of those, whether those fifth and sixth graders still are willing to, in their own way, kind of like you were saying, in their own way, acknowledge you, choose to walk by your room, say hello, probably not with words, but eye contact, because that's the most that you can get out of them. But the measure that I get during the school year, I would say, because I think those reflective are really powerful, that you did a good job. I know 2 ways. First off, my teaching podium. I have this little stand that I just leave my basil that I never look at because, I hate reading what they tell me to read, but it's there. But my teacher stand is almost always covered in cards and drawings and pictures and all these different things that are just collections of what kids have done outside of their school time, and they want to put it up there. And it's not just indoor recess. And I it's looking a little bare this year, so that's a little mental note to myself. But the other one that I would say is, I think we all witness when kids are doing school to do school and when they're loving school a little bit differently. I know at our age range, Bethany, I'm interested for you to answer this too. Your kids are mature enough that they see the light at the end of the tunnel, which might also be frightening, but they have to kind of take it a little bit more seriously at that age. Freshmen, they're just thrilled to be there, causing havoc. But I think that fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, we start to see that transition of kids. And we hear from parents, they used to love school and it's changed. And I feel like that is a really great judge of how school's going, is if I can tell my kids are just doing what they have to move on to the next day and move on to the next week and get to the end of the year, or if they're just all in for the topics. And they don't have to be loving everything we're learning, but you can tell by the respect and how much prompting. If a kid's distracted, they're always going to need prompting, but it's different than like, come on, bud, I need you to get this writing assignment done. How often we're doing that, as opposed to, bud, the expectation, this is how this works. And I think that is a in the moment or middle of the year good catch up to say, I need to invest a little bit more in this relationship or not.
Something that you've all mentioned that I would say was my measure for success was knowing what it should look like for the individual. So, like you both said, especially at the secondary level, the student that says hi to you or gives you the head nod in the hallway. And as a self-contained fifth grade teacher, I had some students, like you said, Bethany, they were ready to talk my ear off the moment they walked in, and others where they were only saying hi to me if I said hi to them first. But then all of a sudden in October, they're saying, see you, Mr. Ehrman, when they leave unprompted, to catch their bus. And so I think the only way you know those levels of success is when you're taking the time to know the individual, to know what that level of success can look like or should look like. And so you are taking the genuine time to know them on an individual basis and to know what is a big deal when you get a response for them. And it pairs back to knowing what sports they're in or attending those things, but just knowing them as individuals. And like you said, Candace, using their name, no matter how hard it is, no matter how many kids you have, using their names is so powerful. We had a guest a couple weeks ago that mentioned this, and I started thinking about that now as a coach. I constantly see my kids as middle schoolers and high schoolers, and I've really been making a consistent effort when I see them to say their name. And when I see them like 20 yards down the hallway, I am just processing like crazy, trying to recall what their name is so that I can acknowledge them. And I've already seen the difference. They might walk past me and like sometimes they genuinely don't notice I'm walking past, or they're kind of too cool. And if they're acting like they're too cool, I'll just very quietly say, "Hi, Sammy. Hi, Steve," as they walk past. And then if I see them again in the next couple weeks, I get a genuine hi from them and excited from them, because I think they're impressed, or it touches them that I remembered who they were and I remember their name no matter how long ago it was. So using a person's name is like one of the most important things that you can really focus on doing with them on a daily basis. So we've talked a lot about opening ourselves up to our students and getting our students to open up to us. That's great for forming relationships, but it's also really important to have the student to student relationships in your classroom. So what are some strategies you are using to get your students to have positive relationships with each other, to help have that positive impact on what you have with them and the classroom management and all those pieces?
I'm hoping someone else wants to chime in on that one first.
Whew, that's a tough one.
I'll go first.
Yeah, go
I'll go first. Uh, in physical education, basically wrote the book for social emotional learning, and nobody ever really realized that until COVID. I mean, and you can quote me. Candace Young says, PE teachers, good PE teachers, positive PE teachers. We've all had gym teachers, but I'm talking about physical education teachers that love physical education and health. We invented social emotional learning, self awareness, self management, social awareness, relationship skills, decision making. All of those things are what I teach in physical education class. And all of those things are going to make you a good friend. And maybe this friend wasn't able to catch the ball that their friend was throwing. Lots of times I'll put a really skilled student with a not so skilled student. Now, if I put a student that's not so skilled with a skilled student, and I know the skilled student isn't a very nice friend, then I've got to teach them how to school. They're kindergartners. I got to teach them how to school. I got to teach them how to be a friend. And that's what my job is, because it's their first school experience in my situation. But even when I was at middle school and the higher elementary grades, in PE, it is just embedded in the curriculum. If you are teaching PE the correct way and health the correct way, you're teaching social emotional learning every day, and that is helping your students build relationships with each other as well as relationships with you.
Well, yes, absolutely. SEL, hello, right? For me at the high school level, especially the juniors and seniors, because that's primarily what I teach, I find that they've already formed those bonds, and they come in with them. And I kind of see my job as not necessarily the referee, but the coach, and encouraging this is how things go when you're outside of school. Like, I know the world outside is crazy and people are hateful and ugly and nasty to each other, but this is how we should do things. I understand that this person took the concept that you wanted to focus on, but what can we learn from it? Like, I feel like so much of my management style with those type of situations is let's just take a deep breath for a second. Is this really is this really the hill that it's going to be it for us right now? Um, let's take a step back and see how all of this is going to fall into place. And I feel like having those conversations, and like I said, just kind of being the coach, not the referee in those in the watching them form those relationships, I think that has been helpful for me.
I think, Ken, I can almost predict what your answer is going to be. I have this weird thought about how many hours I've spent with you through this podcast, but
and just imagine if you came to all of
I
them.
know. I was gonna say something complimentary, but no, I think what it comes down to is structuring environments where classmates see each other, their classmates, their pupils, as something other than what socially they view their pupils. And I think structuring conversations or interactive activities in the classroom is where we see kids develop and say, oh, I didn't know you had this artistic ability. Or I I love when kids come in what feels like a click. At least in our classroom, we switch seats every month. The kids design the classroom every month, how they want to adjust it, making some refinements to what was before, but they don't get to choose their seat. I assign their seat specifically for them. And it's so fascinating to see their allegiances to their seat partner for 30 of those days, and then those days shift. And for like 3 or 4 days, they're really holding on to their previous seat partner that they had worked so hard with. They had the rhythm. Oh, I knew Johnny helped me with math, and I had to help him with science. And that's how things worked. And then they start to kind of find that new relationship. And at least at our age, oh no, boys having to sit with girls, or whatever those possible combinations are. But I think strategic efforts of collaboration, how you're talking and monitoring it, because those first few days sitting with a new seat partner makes a huge difference when it comes to the rest of that month. And mostly in the sense of helping you beyond just instructionally, the behaviors, the expectations, the when you're doing think pair shares or group work, setting a standard of how to work in those small groups. We have to reset very frequently. And I think that diversity, seeing kids as something other than, oh, I know he loves soccer and this person likes this band and they love this style of dance, what have you, is the biggest key to shuffle and reset the deck.
Yeah, you kind of hit on something that I wanted to talk about. You just didn't use the same word I was thinking, is intentionality, is being intentional with doing this. You have to make an effort to do it. And all three of you talked about this in a different way. And if you have ideas or you create things that you think will help, you sometimes have to pour gasoline on the fire to get it started. So my first year, our school theme was around the book of bucket fillers, where you fill someone's bucket instead of taking it away from them. And so I had these little plastic buckets. I hung them all on the wall. Each kid had one. It had their name on it. And I had little tickets that they could write a compliment to somebody else, or they could acknowledge someone else with a different color ticket. You filled my bucket because you did this. So there was two ways to do that. First 2 weeks, there was like one ticket in one out of 30 buckets. So one of the days I stayed after school and I put one in every kid's bucket. I wrote a compliment to everyone, and I also told each person how they made me feel better. And after that, it exploded. They used them the rest of the year. I did it maybe one more time where I hit like all of them again at the same time. And I saw the value in that system. I just needed to kickstart it. I needed to get it moving. And once I did that, it really did that. So it was that intentional piece. It was something that I believed that would work, but I needed to spend that intentional time to get it to work. And so if you want to do team building activities or you want to have morning meeting, Matt, you talk about that constantly. It's the intentional piece of spending the time, holding yourself accountable, holding them accountable, and talking about this is why we do it. This is why it's important, and really encouraging that. And just one thing on this for middle school especially, but even high school, make sure you do things where they have to know each other's names. There's a scary statistic out there where it's like 60% of secondary classrooms, the kids don't know each other's names. It would probably be similar in the beginning of the year with even your kindergartners, Candace. So make sure you do activities where they literally have to know every single person's name in that classroom. I've told this to middle school teachers before, and they didn't believe me. And then they would do an activity and they were surprised as to how many kids didn't know everybody's name. And so, it's really important to just do that intentional piece, because the relationships from teacher to student and student to teacher is so valuable, but the relationships across the classroom are just as valuable to get them to open up more, to get them to feel more comfortable. So we're kind of hitting the hour mark here. We're pretty close to it. So I want to give everybody an opportunity. Just one last piece of advice. What do you think teachers need to hear around this idea? And I'm going to add one clarification, other than saying it's important, because we've established now over 100 podcasts and almost an hour here that it is important. So one last piece of advice, whether it's a strategy, something motivational, anything you want to leave with our listeners as we wind down here.
So for me, I think the biggest piece of advice would be to not make it harder than it is. Let yourself out in your classroom and be comfortable with who you are in your classroom as the goofy whatever self that you are, because that's going to show your students that it's okay to be who they are, and that's going to be the foundation for those relationships.
I would say making your kiddos feel valued and respected, and uh, and build the trust, create a healthy classroom environment for learning. It's going to bring out the best in your kiddos. It's going to bring out the best in you. If your kiddos are happy, you're going to go home feeling much more energized to hang out with your kids or your dogs or your family in general, or maybe to mow the yard or whatever. If everyone's having a great time and everybody is being kind, kindness truly is free, and we just need to be kinder, and we just need to show our younger generation that if we would just all be kinder, we need to sprinkle it around like it's confetti, and push through things that are hard. And that's my advice, and y'all got this.
I love both of those. I guess the only thing that I would say is it's okay for you to put your coworkers in uncomfortable situations. And what I mean by that is I have shifted coworkers every once in a while, not by my choice. And I've been really fortunate with who I've worked with. But I don't necessarily need to feel bad if my classroom is my classroom. And if I only work with one other person in my grade level, but even if I had 8 people in my grade level, tough luck. Like, I truly believe, and I think we all believe, that if I can justify why my actions and my efforts are good for kids in any way, then I have no one that I have to check with or question. If I feel like I can justify it by saying, yeah, this was good for 1 kid, 7 kids, all the kids, the entire building, and another teacher can't match the energy, or they don't feel comfortable like I do to be ridiculous, that's fine. But that doesn't need to be a restriction to me either, because at the end of the day, my goal is to make impact on as many kids as possible. And if that means that it's just the kids within the 4 walls of my classroom, or it's beyond that, sometimes it can be self-conscious and make us worried. Don't let it. we deal with judgment all the time, and we are so good, at least in front of kids, ignoring that. The moment that parents start coming in to see some of those things, or coworkers are coming in to observe it. But yeah, we've even had conversations, Ken, off air about how it sometimes feels like we are creating a wedge between us and our coworkers, and that's a real shame. But if you can live with yourself, because guess what, you're doing a good job, that's gonna shine through most evidently, and hopefully they can come around more so than you watering yourself down.
I totally agree with that. And what I would also encourage for someone that feels like they're in the same position is to look at what your coworkers do extremely well and try to tap into that and like ask them for advice and find ways that you can learn from them, because that might also open the doors of them to maybe start to try some different things like that in their classroom. And so my last piece of advice is find a way to hold yourself accountable. Hold yourself accountable to doing this on an individual student basis. I would have like a class list that was purely for relationships. I would write things down. This student plays in the band. This student, so it had interest, but also even just like little checks of like, I had a personal interaction with this student today. And I would even just a check mark. And so then I could look at that and say, wow, there's 10 students here that have 5 check marks, and there's 3 down here that have 1. I need to make sure tomorrow when they walk into the classroom, I'm going to say hi to them. I'm going to sit with them during morning work, and I'm going to ask them about what they did last night, the weekend, what's coming up, something. I'm going to have some sort of conversation with them. And so it was a system for me to make sure that I wasn't forgetting anyone, because as a classroom that teaches 30 students, that's hard enough. When you're a secondary teacher, or Candace with your kindergarten academy, when you are teaching multiple classes, I saw it as a STEM teacher, it becomes harder and harder. So you have to find a way to hold yourself accountable if you truly want to make sure you connect with each and every student. And it will also help the students realize that you care about all of them and you don't have favorites, and you really genuinely care about them all in different ways, because you're making that time for all of them. We really didn't have time to talk about this, but I would just say, don't forget about the parents. Don't forget about forming relationships with the parents, whether it's through communication, through phone calls. Make sure you are involving them in the process, because that will also further impact your relationship with the students. So Bethany and Candace, thank you so much for coming back with us. I love this conversation. I really think we did a good job of peeling past the surface of relationships matter and digging into it, and giving advice and talking about different strategies. So I think this will be really beneficial for any teacher to listen to. So the last thing I'll leave it with is, how can our audience connect with you or follow along with you if they'd love to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I follow me on Twitter, on TikTok. I'm at PettyWapEDU on TikTok, and I'm at Bethany_Petty on Twitter. I also have a blog, usingeducationaltechnology.com, and a couple of books that you can check out too. Looking forward to connecting with everyone.
You have to be graduated, though, in order to connect with Bethany.
Only high
yes,
school graduates.
Yes,
yes,
on the bus. Have to be on the bus.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yes.
I love it. I have Facebook, of course. I use that a lot. I share a lot of my PE ideas on there. I also have Twitter, and my Twitter is at Candace Young 37. And I'm an open national trainer, so I write a lot of the curriculum that the online physical education network releases for free. And so you can always follow me on there. I also do professional developments around the United States. I've been, north, south, everywhere, and I can come teach you how to be a better kindergarten teacher for your kiddos if you ever need help with that, because I know the young kids scare a lot of people. So I'm always here to lean on, and have a great one, y'all.
Thank you so much. You can follow me at Ken Ehrman, as well as our podcast at Power EDU Up. Matt, leave our audience with how they can follow you, and then you can shut us on down here.
All right. So you can follow me on Twitter through EdTechNeighbor. And I think, guys, we left the audience feeling powered up. So it is time to power down this episode. Thank you so much. Hopefully you're listening to this in summer when you're relaxing, but hopefully revved up to come back to the school year and make those first 2 weeks count. I think that's critical. We didn't even touch on that, but really carry the momentum through the year. So save up all the energy, relax, enjoy, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.